All right. Thank you for participating in Clean Slate Advocacy Day on March 8th. We are going to provide a legislative advocacy overview for you today, along with some key points about clean slate messaging to hit on in your meetings with legislators. So to start us off, Sarah Owsley is going to talk about legislative advocacy 101 and 101 and what to expect in the Capitol.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My name is Sarah Owsley. I'm the Advocacy Director, which means all of the training that we offer, I get to do, which is a really fun and exciting thing for me. I'm just going to quickly provide some fast training about how to make the most of your day in Jefferson City for this Clean Slate Advocacy Day. And hopefully we'll be able to join you in person as well that day. So what is legislative advocacy? That's a very excellent question, fictional person who asked me that. It's an opportunity to educate policymakers around issues, particularly the issues that we care about. Often when you visit Jeff City, it may be a little bit more flexible why you're coming to the Capitol, why you're talking to lawmakers. And certainly when you're at home and you're engaging in advocacy, it may be less targeted. Today, we really want to use the most of our day together and our day with lawmakers to really focus on Clean Slate and why Missouri needs automated expungement. Advocacy is a process of sharing facts, figures, stories to talk about the reality, talk about our neighbors' experiences, our own experiences, so that lawmakers really understand what it looks like in everyday lives. Sometimes we might have opportunities to testify on behalf of certain pieces of legislation. It's very unlikely that that will happen for the Clean Slate Advocacy Day. So just be prepared that in other opportunities and other spaces, we might engage in that type of advocacy. We're going to ask lawmakers to vote in support or opposition of specific policies. We're going to tell them that we like this policy or we dislike this policy and that we want them to move it forward or not. And we're going to always invite others to join us in the process. We can do more together than we can on our own. Other folks have really important experiences and information, and lawmakers need to hear from you and from the people that you know. Good. Lawmakers need to hear from you for a lot of reasons. The first is that in the Missouri State Legislature, we file hundreds of bills every session, and lawmakers just are not experts on every topic. When folks decide to run for office, there is not usually a period of time where they think, how many people in poverty are in my inner circle? And how can I expand that circle before I run for office, before I become a lawmaker? That continues to be true, right? And so it's our job as advocates to make sure to talk to lawmakers about the bills that we care about, because there may or may not be folks around them who are already doing that. Lawmakers probably don't have the expertise in their professional lives that you all have. And even if they do, they still want to hear from you. And they certainly don't have the type of community experiences that you have. You have a unique view on your own life, and you have a unique view on the lives of your neighbors and community members, and lawmakers need to hear from that. So it's the responsibility of experts and advocates. We need to be talking to our lawmakers about that because there are not other folks who are doing it, and because these issues really have an extraordinary impact on the lives of our friends and neighbors around us. And so we need to be talking to our lawmakers about it. Finally, these lawmakers are going to make, they're going to cast votes that have real impacts in folks' lives, real impacts in our lives, in our community members' lives. People with low incomes, people with criminal records feel that impact disproportionately. They have fewer options available to them. And so when policy limits those options or changes those options, those folks really feel that impact pretty significantly. So it's important that lawmakers are well prepared to make votes that they really understand what those votes are likely to do and what that policy is likely to do in the lives of everyday Missourians. So make sure, that we make today effective. This may or may not be your first trip to the Capitol. It may or may not be the first trip this year. There's lots of opportunities. You may come every week. But this is an opportunity to really focus on talking about Clean Slate with our lawmakers, not just for that person that we're talking to that day, though certainly that's going to be impactful, but it's also about building momentum. And so all throughout that day in the hallway, lawmakers, other lobbyists, other advocates should be hearing little whispers about Clean Slate if we're doing our job well. And so it's important that we are doing our job as well as we can, right? So we're prepared to make today as effective as possible. Make sure when you talk with your lawmakers that you're brief, you're respectful of their time, you appreciate that they're having a very busy day. Every day in the Capitol is a very busy day, and they're taking a few moments out of their day to spend time with you. And make sure that we're honest in our communications. We don't want to exaggerate. We certainly don't want to lie. We don't want to make threats to lawmakers. It's very unlikely that you can prevent a lawmaker from being reelected. And so we really don't want to kind of go in with that type of positioning that really stops folks from listening to me or listening to us, right? If someone came up to me and was like, hey, you have to do this thing I want or else you're going to lose your job, I would probably just giggle at them like that and not really listen to them anymore, right? So make sure that we're leading with being respectful, being kind, and really like working on forming that relationship. If this is the first time that you're talking to that lawmaker, and this is the first day in an ongoing relationship with that lawmaker. And so really like keeping that framing in your mind is really important. Make sure though that you're forceful, that your language is steady, and ensure that you carry forward the messaging that you really want them to hear from you well and effectively. And Gwen's going to prepare you with some of that in a little bit. If you get individual time with a lawmaker, make sure you follow up with a thank you. That can be a written card. Sometimes I bring thank you cards with me into the Capitol because there are a few, down times, right? And so I have 20 quiet minutes. I'll just write all of my thank you cards, make sure they're ready to go. I can even drop them in the mailbox. They're in the Capitol in the basement, and get those to them as quickly as possible. If you just get a few minutes in a hallway or something like that, an email thank you is probably appropriate. But if they spend a length of time with you, it's nice to send them a little card. It makes them feel important. It gives them something to pin to their note board right behind them while they're meeting with other folks. And it keeps your name and your organization top of mind for them. It helps them think kindly of you, think well of you, and makes it more likely that they're going to listen to you next time you go and talk to them. We used to train people to remind them that they are the experts on the issues and lawmakers need to hear from them. I really like to instead remind folks to consider who is the expert in any given circumstance. With Clean Slate, despite all the data, all the numbers, all the real life stories that I can share, the experts are the people who are living with criminal records. And so remember the things that they would want to be shared with that lawmaker. Remember the real impact that's happening in those lives. And whenever possible, make sure that you are centering the experience of people with criminal records in the information that you're providing and how you're talking about record clearing. Remember, advocacy is nonpartisan. There is no guarantee any room that you walk into, some lawmaker is going to agree with you or disagree with you. You will find champions all across the political spectrum, and that's absolutely true with record clearing. There are folks who care deeply about this issue from all political parties, and it's important to make sure that you're not prejudging any individual lawmaker when you walk into their office that day. Remember, boundaries are for everyone. I think often when you talk with lawmakers, you'll have a very good experience. They'll be glad to hear from you. They'll ask questions. That interaction and that time together will feel positive to everyone. There may be times that it does not feel great, or that questions are not ideal and make us uncomfortable or are not really related to the thing we came to talk about with that lawmaker. This is just a reminder that every person gets to set their boundaries and communicate those out, and that includes with lawmakers. And so it's useful sometimes to practice some boundary phrases like, that's not what I came here to talk to you about. That's not my experience of my community. That's not what I've seen. The data doesn't bear that out, right? Things like that that can help you pivot from a conversation that doesn't feel like what you came here today for back to what you did come here for today. Make sure when you're sharing your messaging that you're sharing it a couple of times in your conversations. As I said, Gwen's going to run over some messaging points for you. There are probably points that are particularly impactful for you or for the lawmaker that you're going to talk to. And if you're not sure what those are, certainly folks at Empower and folks at the Clean Slate table can help you make that determination. But make sure that you are not going to be able to hit every single message repeatedly as you meet with these lawmakers, particularly when you get 10 minutes with them in an elevator, right? So make sure that you know the things that you want to communicate, the things that are closest to home for you or are important for this particular lawmaker to hear, and you hit those messages 2 or 3 times. Repetitiveness, right, is important because when we hear things more frequently, we tend to remember them and hold on to them longer. Deal with the fear of advocacy. It's important to remember that being afraid of practicing advocacy is not a personal defect or flaw. It is not a thing that is wrong with you or that you are special about, right? Lots of people are nervous and afraid to practice advocacy for a variety of reasons. It feels like lawmakers are above us. They are going to be dressed in very fancy suits. They're going to look and feel very important in the place that they are in. Remember, we elect them, we put them there, but also remember this is their job, just like this is your job, or this is something that's important to them as a community member, just like this is something that's important to you as a community member. There are lots of ways that we can connect with lawmakers, even if it feels like we cannot. And so it's important to remember that most Missouri politicians, most Missouri elected officials are folks who care deeply about the issues of their community, and that's why they ran for office. And so we can connect with them about that because we care deeply about the issues in our communities. It is true that many nonprofits have been told that because they work for a nonprofit or because they're a nonprofit organization that they can't do any lobbying. That is not a true fact. However, that is a falsehood. Nearly all nonprofits in Missouri can do some level of lobbying. It's important to know what those limits might be in your organization. Every single person, no matter who they work for, can engage in lobbying and in advocacy if they are not a representative of that organization that day. So there are some very small number of organizations, legal aid organizations, some really specific nonprofits who really are not allowed to engage in any lobbying with any of their funding. Most nonprofits likely have some funding that is limited and they're not allowed to engage in lobbying while they're using that funding, but there's other unrestricted funds that are available to them. It's also important to remember that a lot of the advocacy that we will do on this day is just education. It's not actually lobbying. So if we say to lawmakers, here is the impact of record clearing in Missourians' lives, that's probably not lobbying. If we ask them to vote a certain way or we tell them this is what we want them to do, then it becomes lobbying. But if you are very sure and you have checked with the people in your organization who can say that you are not allowed to do any lobbying, there's still a lot of advocacy that you can do this day. And so it's important to know what those limits may or may not be. But if you are a staff member and you are just going on this day as your own self, you can do whatever you'd like to this day. Your organization really can't influence that. I also like to make sure and mention that Missouri's state capitol is very white and very privileged. Folks feel uncomfortable when they walk into that building, and that was by design, right? That building was often not built for many of the folks that we organize now and bring into the Capitol building. Many populations have been historically and intentionally shut out of the lawmaking process. And so I like to share and recognize that tension just so that folks can be prepared, right? You can walk into the building, you can feel that like wave of anxiety and imposter syndrome. You can take a deep breath and you can remember that all of that is there because it wasn't built for you and you need to be there because this space was not built for you. It's like, let that light a fire under you that this is important and worthwhile work that you are doing. This information and your experience is needed here, and this building and this institution was not built for you to share it. And that's a good reason why you can push through your anxiety in this moment. I can push through my imposter syndrome. This isn't about me as a person. This is about an institution that was not built for people who look like me. And the things that I'm doing here are more important than I can even recognize because of that history. And then finally, remember that today is just the start, right? You're going to meet with lawmakers, maybe in their office, maybe in the hallway, maybe you're going to pull them from the floor. You're going to have a conversation with them where you're sharing the information that you know, you're going to share your messaging, you're going to leave them something. But this is just the start. Today is not the last day, right? You should be following up with these lawmakers moving forward. This is the beginning of a relationship. Some ideas for how to do that, right? Join your lawmakers mailing list. If you look at their website on the House or the Senate website, house.mo.gov, senate.mo.gov, many of them have mailing lists. Sign up for those mailing lists. Show up where you know they're going to be. If they're going to have a community event near you, something like that, show up, remind them that you met them in the Capitol this day, and that you really care about these issues. Be the person that they need to talk to about criminal legal reform, about automated record clearing, et cetera. Make sure that you're sharing new reports, news articles, things in your local paper, et cetera, as you come across them, so that they hear your name, your organization, they hear the Clean Slate Missouri campaign regularly, and they hear about automated record clearing as often as possible. Meet with them in the off season. Missouri's legislative session goes January through May. Come June, many of these lawmakers are ready to meet with you in your communities, in their neighborhoods, have coffee with them, continue to talk about the issues that you care about. Even in a perfect world where we pass the perfect package of Clean Slate record clearing this legislative session, it's still important that come June, you're talking to them about the implementation, you're talking to them about other policies that impact this group of folks, et cetera. Make sure that you're continuing that relationship, because there's a lot of power there, and there is no shortage of good work to be done in this space. And as much as possible, make your time together and moving forward valuable and positive. Make them really think good things of your organization as much as possible, while being honest and intentional and forceful about what you need from them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really helpful. Great stuff to keep at the top of mind. And that day in the Capitol, there will be multiple Empower Missouri staff members available all day long. So if you need a refresher, or just to kind of get some, anxiety out in a conversation with one of us during that day of advocacy, we will be available for you to do that. So I'm going to provide just an overview of some of the really key points on Clean Slate that we want to make sure that we're touching on with legislators. And as Sarah mentioned, I'm about to go through a lot of information. So it's not like each of you needs to go over every single one of these points with all of your legislators. As I'm reviewing this messaging, think about what is most relevant to your personal experience. What do you really resonate with? If you're meeting with a specific legislator or visiting a legislator from your representative, from your legislative district, and you know that they are, particularly concerned with business issues or with family issues, you might choose to kind of switch up your messaging to reflect that in the individual that you're talking to. And the other thing really important to keep top of mind is our legislation numbers. So we have House Bill 352, sponsored by Representative Phil Cristofanelli. This bill just got referred to the House Judiciary Committee. And then Senate Bill 347 is sponsored by Senator Curtis Trent. So try to, reference these bills by number, refer to them as the Clean Slate bills, so folks start to get familiar with our actual bill numbers, because there's a lot of pieces of legislation that go through, and the legislators are not going to be familiar necessarily with Clean Slate already. So just saying the Clean Slate bill might not really be very meaningful to them. So make sure to keep these numbers at top of mind. And another thing I want to mention, we'll have this information in a one-pager that I'll be sending out with this recording. And then we'll also have some material that day, some, kind of palm cards that you can leave behind, some fact sheets that you can leave behind for the legislators as well. So the top line message, if you just get one thing across about Clean Slate, it's this, that Clean Slate is about fairness. Missouri has a current expungement process, but it's expensive, it's difficult to navigate, and it shuts out people that already qualify for expungement. So people that already qualify to have their record sealed are not able to access that really important and necessary expungement that they qualify for and they meet the criteria for. So this means that folks with money, folks with powerful connections, are treated differently than everyone else. We know that to be true in most facets of the criminal legal system, and this is another place where that's really showing up. So automating the process evens the playing field for everyone and ensures that everybody, regardless of socioeconomic status, or any other demographics, is able to access the expungement that they qualify for. Clean slate is about second chances. We believe that a person's life should not be defined by their worst mistake, and that those that have completed their sentence, whether that's a prison term, whether that's a sentence of probation, and have stayed out of trouble after that, deserve a second chance. They deserve the opportunity to move on with their lives. Folks that have paid their debt to society should not be punished forever by being denied jobs, housing, and the opportunity to take care of their families. Clean slate legislation would create effective members of the community and promotes a hard work ethic. So we're really talking about bringing folks back fully into the fold by removing that perpetual punishment that a criminal record always stamps someone with. Clean slate is about safety. I think this is a really important point to highlight because it kind of goes against what some folks might think about record sealing legislation. Studies show that people with a prior conviction who don't commit another crime within 4 to 7 years after that offense are no more likely to commit a crime in the future than anybody else in the general population. Clean slate makes local communities safer by giving people an opportunity to get back on their feet, turn their lives around, and support themselves and their families. So again, when we support people and give them the opportunity to move forward with their lives beyond a criminal record, we're making our community safer for everybody. Clean slate is good for Missouri's economy. This has been a really powerful argument in support of clean slate in some of the states that have already passed automatic expungement legislation. We know that right now we're at a point where our economy is going through some challenges. Local businesses are really struggling to find workers for openings, but there are tens of thousands of qualified applicants who can't take can't take advantage of those job opportunities because of their criminal records, some of which might be decades old. And Clean Slate will help these individuals build a better life while strengthening local businesses and boosting our local economy. Clean slate is going to help Missouri families. So we know that a criminal record doesn't just impact that individual, it impacts everybody that they share a household with, everybody that relies upon them. Everybody is impacted by the barriers that a criminal record places on someone. About half of American children have a parent with a criminal record, and the long-term consequences of a parent's record can significantly impact a child's mental development, their education, future employment opportunities, and overall well-being. So when parents are held back, kids are held back. By removing those parental barriers to employment, housing, and education, we can help give all children the chance that they deserve. So if you're talking to someone that's like, oh, well, they committed the crime, so this is just what they have to deal with, I think this is a really good point to bring up, that it's really not the individual that's the only one suffering those consequences. It's everybody that they're connected to, including kids. So those are the key messages. I'm just going to share a couple more kind of statistics and talking points that kind of just reiterate and double down on those key messages. So if you say anything about the current expungement process, make sure to hit on the fact that it's costly, it's time consuming, and above all else, it is very confusing. We have a lot of attorneys that are involved with the Clean Slate campaign, and they will be the first to tell you that this process is extremely complicated, even if you've gone through law school. So for the rest of us, it is a very, very complicated process, not transparent, not accessible. We know that over 500,000 people in Missouri have convictions that are currently eligible for record sealing under current Missouri law, but that only 1% of those individuals, actually less than 1% of those individuals, have actually been able to obtain an expungement through the process. This translates to a waiting period. If you take the current clearance rates for record sealing, it would take about 1,000 years for Missouri to seal all of the records that are currently expungible. And that doesn't count, the new records that become eligible for expungement each year. So that's why we believe we need Clean Slate. If you had any kind of a program with a less than 1% success rate, you would say it was time to go back to the drawing board and figure out a better way to do things. The average expungement cost $500 in Missouri. This does not include any attorney fees or travel cost associated. You have to go back to the county of origin where the offense occurred to do the proceedings there. So this is just kind of the starting cost for an expungement, and something that a lot of folks that are being held back from employment opportunities and living in poverty because of their criminal record, $500 is not a number that a lot of Missouri families are going to be able to come up with for a non-necessary expense. We know that the consequences of a record go far beyond the sentence. As I mentioned earlier, this idea of perpetual punishment, once you have that record, it's with you for life, and it can hold you back in so many different ways, including limited housing options, a lifelong reduction in earning potential, undermining family stability, difficulty accessing educational opportunities, and limited employment opportunities. We know that applicants with a criminal record are only half as likely as other job seekers to get a call back from a potential employer. And we know that there's nearly 50,000 state and regulatory restrictions that limit folks with a record from accessing employment, from occupational licensing, from housing, a whole host of things. Here in Missouri, it means that you can't serve on a jury or be elected to hold public office. So there's a lot of very specific laws that restrict what folks with a criminal record can do. And then, of course, there's also that mental burden that having a record, knowing that, it's the first thing that folks will see when they run a background check, knowing that, all of these things are off limits for you, that creates a really powerful mental and emotional toll on folks that I think is also an important thing to highlight, especially if you're speaking from your own experience. We know that private background checks are used by 2/3 of colleges, almost 9 in 10 employers, and 8 in 10 landlords. And these private background checks are really what's going to be the most impacted by Clean Slate record sealing. In Missouri, we seal records rather than fully clearing them. That means that law enforcement and that courts still have access to that record. If someone were to commit an offense in the future, they could still see record of that previous offense. But these private background checks that are used all over the place, that's where your record is going to be sealed, and they can no longer access that information. We know that nearly 50% of children in the US have at least one parent with a criminal record, as I mentioned earlier, so really important to highlight the impact that this has on kids. And we believe that clean slate legislation will provide fairness, safety, and second chances. A year after a record has been cleared, people are 11% more likely to be employed. So this is really powerful data in support of record sealing legislation, to show that, this is help bringing people back into the fold of the economy. It's boosting the state economy for all of us. We also know that the wages of folks that receive expungements increase by more than 20% just 1 year after a record's been cleared. That is a huge impact on individuals and families. That is a very large number just in the first year after record clearing, that folks can expect to really see their quality of life raise up in a lot of very significant ways. And last point to highlight is that 5 years after an expungement, individuals that receive that expungement were less likely than members of the general public to be convicted of a crime. So this second chance, people really take that second chance seriously. When they've been held back in so many ways by a record, giving the opportunity to move forward without that hanging over their heads, people don't want to mess that opportunity up. And so this is just another way that we can show that Clean Slate is going to make our state safer for everyone. And that is the end of our presentation. This information, again, will be shared with you in kind of a one-pager format as well. So you can print that out, bring it with you, make notes on it to quickly reference during our advocacy day We'll also have some printable materials that you can leave behind in your meetings with legislators. And we are really looking forward to connecting with all of you amazing advocates in the Capitol on March 8th, and talking to our legislators about why the time is right for automatic expungement in Missouri. So thank you all for participating. Please feel free to share this recording with other folks as well, even if they're not going to be able to be there for Clean Slate Advocacy Day, just to highlight some of the points that we've talked about in this overview. So thank you.